Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
The world is changing. The future will be very different from the times we know now. But these changes are similar to things that happened many times before in history. Learning about the past can help us understand the future. Let me tell you a story about how I learned this. In 1971, I was a young man working at the New York Stock Exchange. It was a big surprise when the United States government said it did not have enough money. At that time, paper money like the US dollar was linked to gold. Countries used gold to pay each other. People could change their US dollars for gold. But the US was spending more money than it had in gold. People worried the US would run out of gold. So President Nixon spoke on television. He said the US would stop changing dollars for gold. He did not say the US could not pay its debts, but that is what it meant. I watched this happen. I thought it was a big problem. I expected the stock market, where people buy and sell parts of companies, to go down the next day, but I was wrong. When the market opened, prices went up a lot. This surprised me because I had never seen a country break its money promise like that before. I started to study history. I found out that something very similar happened in 1933. President Roosevelt also stopped changing dollars for gold because the country was running out, and the stock market went up then too. In both situations, the government could print more paper money after breaking the link to gold. Printing more money made the value of each dollar go down, but prices for things like stocks and gold went up. Studying these events taught me an important idea. When governments have big money problems, they often print more money. This makes the price of assets like stocks and gold increase. This experience showed me another important principle. To understand what might happen next, you need to look at what happened in the past. This way of thinking helps us understand today's world. Right now, we see three big things happening together. First, many countries have very large debts and are printing a lot of money. Second, there are big disagreements inside countries between rich and poor people, and between different political groups. Third, there are growing problems between powerful countries, like the United States and China. History shows that when these three things happen at the same time, it often means the world order, the way countries work together, is going to change in a big way. 2. What is an order? Let's talk about what an order is. An order is like a set of rules. It helps people know how to deal with each other. There are two main kinds of orders. First, there are orders for inside a country. We can call these internal orders. Think about the main laws of a country. These laws tell people how to live together and what they can or cannot do. These rules help keep things organized inside the country. For example, the United States made its main rules, its internal order, a long time ago in 1789 after a war. Russia got a new internal order in 1917 after a big change there. China started its current internal order in 1949 after a war inside the country finished. Second, there are orders for between countries. We can call this the world order. This order is about how different countries deal with each other. It includes agreements that countries make together. These agreements cover things like trade or how to solve problems without fighting. Orders do not last forever. they often change. This usually happens after big conflicts or wars. When there is a war inside a country, the internal order might change. When there is a war between countries, the world order might change. New winners often make new rules. The world order we live in now started after the Second World War finished around 1945. Before that war, things were different. After the war, the United States became the most powerful country in the world. Because it was so strong, it had a big say in making the new rules for how countries would work together. This is sometimes called the American World Order. An important part of this new world order was about money. In 1944, many countries agreed to new rules for money used between them. They decided that the US dollar would be the main world currency. This special kind of money is called a reserve currency. A reserve currency is money that many countries around the world use and trust. They use it for trade and they save it in their banks. Having the reserve currency gives a country a lot of power. It helps the country become very rich and important in the world. These big changes, where one country becomes powerful and sets the rules, and then later another country might take its place, happen again and again through history. This pattern of rising and falling power is like a big cycle. We will look more at this big cycle later. 3. Measuring country power. How can we know if a country is strong or weak? We need a way to measure its power. It is like checking a person's health. We look at different signs to understand how powerful a country is. There are 8 main signs or metrics that help us do this. First is education. How good are the schools in a country? Are people learning useful skills and knowledge? Good education helps a country grow strong. Second is making new things. This means innovation and technology. Does the country create new ideas or new machines? Countries that are good at this often become more powerful. Third is competitiveness. How well can the country make products and sell them to other countries? If they can sell things cheaper or better than others, they are competitive. Fourth is economic output. This means how much the country produces in total. It includes all the goods and services made in the country in a year. A bigger output often means more power. Fifth is their part of world trade. How much does the country buy and sell with the rest of the world? A country doing a lot of trade usually has more influence. Sixth is military strength. How strong is the country's army, navy, and air force? A strong military helps protect the country and its trade. Seventh is the power of its financial center. Are the country's banks and stock markets important for the world's money? A big financial center attracts money and gives power. Eighth is the strength of its money. Is the country's money used by many other countries for trade or savings? This is called a reserve currency, and it is a big sign of power. We can look at all these 8 signs together. We combine them to get one score for a country's total power. This score helps us see if a country is strong or weak right now. It also helps us see if it was strong in the past. We can see if a country is rising, meaning getting stronger, or declining, meaning getting weaker. Using these measures, we can study the power of big empires over the last 500 years. For example, we can look at the Dutch Empire, the British Empire, the United States, and China. When we look at their power scores over time, we see a pattern. Countries rise and become powerful. Then after some time they start to decline. This rise and fall happens again and again in history. It looks like a cycle. These cycles often overlap with one country rising as another declines. 4. How countries become strong. The rise of a country usually begins after a big war or conflict. New, strong leaders take control. These leaders build new systems to make the country work well. They create rules and institutions that help the country grow. At first, there is often a time of peace. People feel safe because the leadership is strong and no one wants to fight it. This peace helps the country become richer. Good education is very, very important for a country to become strong. Education is not just about learning facts in school. It also teaches useful skills. Importantly, it helps build good character. This means people learn to be honest, work hard, and respect the rules and laws. Families, schools, and sometimes religious places teach these things. When people have good character and skills, they can work well together. This helps the country become orderly and have less corruption. Strong education helps people think of new ideas. This leads to new inventions and better technology. Countries start making new and better things, not just basic products. For example, a long time ago, the Dutch became very strong. They had excellent education and invented new types of ships. These ships could travel far around the world to trade goods. They also invented new ways to use money for business, like the first big companies and stock markets. Countries that innovate become better at making things and selling them to other countries. Their part of world trade gets bigger and bigger. They become more competitive. As countries trade more around the world, they need to protect their ships and trading routes. So they build strong armies and navies. A powerful military helps keep their trade safe from enemies. To pay for all this growth, like better schools, roads, new inventions, and the military, countries need good money systems. They develop markets where people can save money and invest it in businesses. These are called capital markets, like stock markets and bond markets. This helps new ideas and businesses get the money they need to grow. The Dutch were the first to create a public company and a stock market to help pay for their trading trips. Successful countries often have the world's main financial centers, where money from all over the world comes. When a country becomes the biggest trader in the world, other countries start using its money for buying and selling things internationally. People and governments in other countries may also want to save money in that country's currency because they trust it. When a country's money is used and saved widely around the world, it becomes the world's main reserve currency. The Dutch guilder was a reserve currency, then the British pound, and later the US dollar. Having a reserve currency is a big advantage. It lets the country borrow more money than others. This power helps the country become even stronger for a time. 5. Staying at the top. This part of the cycle is when a country is at the top. It is rich and powerful. Many things are going well, but problems are starting. These problems are often hidden inside the country's success and grow slowly over time. People in the successful country earn more money. This is good for them, but it makes products from this country more expensive. Other countries can make things more cheaply. This means the top country becomes less competitive. It is harder for them to sell their products to the world. Also, other countries learn the top country's good ideas. They copy how the top country makes things. This also makes the top country less competitive than before. When people become richer, their lives change. They might not want to work as hard as before. They start to enjoy more free time and nice things. Sometimes they focus too much on luxury. The children and grandchildren of the people who built the country's power grow up differently. They are used to having wealth. This can make them and the country a bit weaker when facing challenges later. As the country gets richer, not everyone gets rich in the same way. Usually, some people become very rich while many others stay less rich. This creates a big difference between the rich and the poor. Rich people often have more power. They can use their power and money to get more advantages, for example, influencing rules. Poor people can feel that the system is not fair. This can cause anger and unhappy feelings between the groups. Countries at the top often have the world's main money, the reserve currency. This means other countries trust and use their money. Because of this, the top country finds it easy to borrow money from other countries. They start to borrow a lot, maybe too much. This extra money lets them spend more for a while, which feels good. But borrowing too much makes the country's money situation weaker over time. Sometimes this borrowing helps create financial bubbles. This is when prices for things like houses go up too high too fast. Being a top power is expensive. The country needs a strong military to protect its trade around the world and keep its empire safe. It costs a lot to have soldiers and ships everywhere. Over time, the cost of protecting the empire becomes very large. It can become more expensive than the money the empire brings in. The country spends more money than it earns to keep its position. This spending adds to the country's problems. These financial problems and internal divisions slowly weaken the empire from the inside. 6. Why countries become weak. Countries do not stay at the top forever. After a time of being rich and powerful, the problems that started earlier grow bigger. This leads to the third part of the big cycle, the decline. A country usually becomes weak because of serious money problems and fighting. This fighting can happen inside the country between its own people, or it can be conflicts and wars with other countries. Often, the country has borrowed too much money during its time at the top. When the economy slows down or gets weak, it becomes very hard to pay back these large debts. Financial bubbles, which grew when times were good, often break. This causes big difficulties for people and businesses. The government needs money quickly to fix things. It usually chooses one main action, printing lots of new money. This seems like an easy solution at first. But printing money has bad results. When there is much more money, but the country is not producing more goods and services, each dollar, pound, or guilder becomes less valuable. The country's currency gets weaker compared to others. Prices for everyday things start to go up quickly. This is called inflation. Inflation makes life much harder for most people, especially those who are not rich. At the same time, problems inside the country often get much worse. The big difference between rich people and poor people creates anger. When the economy is bad, many people feel the system is unfair. This leads to protests and deep divisions in society. People may strongly support leaders from the political left who want to share wealth more equally, or they might support leaders from the political right who want to protect the wealth of those who already have it. Society becomes split. These internal conflicts make the country weaker. Sometimes rich people worry about the future. They might fear new taxes or general instability. So they move their money to other assets or even to other countries they believe are safer. When wealthy people and their money leave, the government collects less tax. This makes the country's money problems even worse. It is a hollowing out process. Productivity can also fall because there is more fighting and less working together. A country that is weak inside becomes vulnerable to challenges from outside. Other countries that are rising in power see this weakness. They may decide to challenge the leading country's position in the world. The weak empire faces difficult choices. It can fight the challenger, but wars are very expensive, especially when the country already has money problems. Or it can retreat and lose power and influence, which signals its weakness to everyone. Often, these conflicts lead to war. The final stage of decline often involves the country's money, especially if it is the world's reserve currency. If people and governments around the world see the country is weak, has too much debt, and is printing too much money, they lose trust. They start selling the currency and the country's debt. This selling makes the currency even weaker. When the world loses faith in the leading country's money, it usually marks the end of its time as the dominant power. The empire's cycle is finishing. 7. Lessons from the past. History shows us many examples of the big cycle. Looking at past empires helps us understand how countries rise and fall. These stories often follow similar steps over time. Let's look at the Dutch Empire first. They became powerful around 400 years ago. They had good education and many new ideas. They invented new kinds of ships for trade around the world. They also created new ways to manage money for businesses, like the first stock market. This helped them become very rich and strong through global trade. But later, problems started. They fought expensive wars, including several against the British. They borrowed too much money to pay for these wars and to keep their empire running. Eventually, they had too much debt and their power went down. Next came the British Empire. They learned from the Dutch and became very good at making and selling things. They became more competitive. Their trade grew across the world, and they built a strong military to protect it. London became the world's most important financial city for a long time. The British pound became the main world currency, the reserve currency. But staying at the top was difficult and costly. Britain fought in 2 big world wars in the 20th century. These wars cost a lot of money and left Britain with large debts. After World War II, they were no longer the top power. The United States dollar replaced the pound as the world's reserve currency. The United States became the world's leading power after 1945, following the end of the war. The U.S. economy was very strong. The U.S. dollar became the most important currency for international trade and for countries to save. This reserve currency status helped the U.S. borrow money more easily than other countries. For many years, the U.S. was the clear leader. Today, the U.S. is still very powerful. However, it now shows some signs that often appear in the later stages of the cycle for empires. It has very large debts. There are also growing disagreements inside the country between different groups of people. China is another important example in history. China was a very powerful empire many times in the past, over hundreds and thousands of years. It had periods of great strength, invention, and wealth, but it also had periods of decline and weakness. In recent history, after a long period of decline, China started to grow very quickly again. It is now becoming a major world power once more, challenging the current leading power. These stories of the Dutch, the British, the US, and China show clear patterns. Even though the times, the people, and the technologies change, the basic reasons why countries become strong and why they become weak seem to repeat again and again. Studying these cycles from the past 500 years gives us important lessons about the present and maybe the future. 8. The future and us. The times coming soon will be very different from the times we know, but history shows us that similar times have happened many times before. The big cycle helps us understand these patterns. By studying the past, we can learn about what might happen in the future. Where are we in the cycle today? We see some important signs now. Many countries have large debts and not enough money to pay them, so their central banks are printing a lot more money. This can make the money worth less. We also see big disagreements inside countries. There are large gaps between rich people and poor people, and people have very different ideas about how things should be. This causes anger and division. At the same time, there are growing arguments between powerful countries. For example, we see competition between the United States, the current leading power, and China, a rising power. These three things together, money problems, internal fighting, and external fighting, often happen before the world order changes. Does this mean that decline must happen? It is very hard for a country to stop declining once it starts, but it is possible. A country needs to see its problems and make difficult choices to become strong again. It is like checking a person's health. We can look at a country's vital signs to see if it is healthy or sick. We can measure things like its education levels, if it makes new things and technology, how much it sells to other countries, and the strength of its money. These signs tell us if a country is getting stronger or weaker. There are two main things that countries need to do well to stay strong. First, a country must earn more money than it spends over time. This means having a productive economy and not building up too much debt. Second, the people inside the country must treat each other well. This means having fairness, working together, and respecting laws and rules. When people fight each other too much, the country becomes weak. How can countries achieve these goals? Good education is very important. It gives people skills and teaches them good character. Making new things helps the economy grow. Being fair helps people feel respected and reduces internal conflict. When a country does these things well, it helps it earn more and helps its people live together peacefully. Understanding the big cycle and these vital signs is important. It helps us see where we are now and the challenges we face. With this understanding, maybe we can make smarter choices to build a better future. We need to think about these lessons from history. Do you see similarities between the history of past powers and what is happening in the world today?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.